Well,
Okay.
let's jump in and get started. And hopefully we get to that question, Jenny, but if not, ask it again at the end. So you're here in the session on ungrading, which is an unfortunate term. I think it brings up wrong connotations perhaps, but really what we want to explore are alternatives to traditional grading. Since I don't know everybody here, I will spend a moment introducing myself. I am Jenni Momsen. I'm faculty over in the Department of Biological Sciences. My research actually happens to be teaching and learning in biology, and so that's where I come to this, this session from. And Jeff, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Jeff Boyer. I'm the Director of Assessment and Accreditation. I've been at NDSU almost 10 years. And when I first arrived at NDSU, I had already been using contract grading, which is not a traditional approach to grading either, but have slowly changed my own approach to grading, and just most recently had a upper level graduate class that used an ungrading approach, which we can explore a little bit later.
Okay, we'll jump into things. Whoops, maybe. First, I'm supposed to give an advertisement. So if you want to discuss ungrading even more, we are hosting another round of the book club this summer, so you can sign up. And we will also be hosting faculty learning communities that'll either focus on further discussion or implementation sorts of things. So we'll advertise this again at the end too. So the driving questions for today are really to think about, what does a grade mean? To think about how grades might harm learning actually, and talk a little bit about alternatives to traditional grading. And we're going to do this all in 30 minutes. Well, now less than 30 minutes, or your money back. Nobody spent anything for this, so. Okay, so we're going to start with a short video called What Learning Looks Like. And the first activity we want you to think about is just reflect. What's the first word that comes to mind after watching the video? And you'll share that in the chat. And don't worry if you repeat what somebody else says. So now we're going to hopefully switch over. Everybody, I'm going to go big screen. We'll see how this goes. I'm going to hit the play button. Hopefully you can hear, although they...
Boys. Try doing this, guys. That's it. I found it. That was it. I found it.
What learning looks like. So share in the chat, what's the first word that comes to mind? Mastery, persistence, practice. Try again until you get it. Whoa, you're going so fast. Grit, determined, painful. Painful, that's always my word. You might have seen me wince a few times. Grit, perseverance, aha moment, yeah. Determined, mistakes, great. Helmet, that is also, I think when I first saw this video, I was like, where's this helmet? Learning, okay.
You missed Silvio's Motorhead comment.
Oh, I did, my apologies. Okay, so lots of words about mistakes, errors, repeated, doing it again and again and again. So that idea of persistence, maybe grit, perseverance, great. So now we want to decide, I wish we could have little breakout rooms in our breakout rooms, but that's probably more than Zoom can handle. And so we want to think about what grade would you give this student in your skateboarding class? Let's pretend we're skateboarding professors teaching skateboarding. Think about what you would give this student as a grade. Think about why. What are the elements you're grading on or share or for? And you can share your ideas in the chat, and we'll compile them here. Jeff, are you able to type in there so I can keep my screen sharing?
You bet.
Okay. So what grade would you give this student and why? Give you a minute to think. She wants to know, what is the grade level outcome? So already thinking about standards. Do we have a standard for this course? You know, an outcome that we're looking for. So the outcome is to, does this trick have a name? I do not know. I would assume it's to nail this trick. Okay, somebody says a pass, that they would get a pass for this. A for the final product. Would that be an A for the overall course then? Okay, A for being able to perform one of the 3 critical elements of the skill. What are the 3 critical elements? A plus, because he demonstrated a willingness to try and learn from his mistakes until he mastered the assignment. So using words like mastery, trying again and again, right? So if you're grading based on successful completion of the trick, the assessment scores would be increasing each attempt. So would you then average those scores in the end? So if you look at this video, if we were to count, I think there are at least 17 attempts. So this individual has 16 Fs and 1 pass grade. So that would average out to an F probably. But you probably wouldn't give this individual an F, right? Take the best 2 performances and average. What if the second best performance was still a fail, but then after that he had the trick? Does that, you know, cause any dissonance for us? I'm betting, Jeff, that your typing doesn't refresh unless I hit refresh. I'm going to try hitting refresh. It's going to take me out of presentation mode. Thanks. Well, we'll just stay not in presentation mode. That'll work, right? So in this discussion through the chat, at least, there are a lot of ideas coming up, right? Averaging it all, grading it because they mastered it in the end, and kind of everything in between. Oh, Tara, I would look into what the X game uses. Okay, great. But we all don't agree necessarily on how we would arrive at the grade for this individual. We have a lot of variation in what we're thinking about, what's important to this grade. And that in and of itself underlies some of the concern with grading in general, is that when we give students a grade, we don't actually all agree on what that grade means, right? So we want to jump into ungrading, which is this movement towards eliminating grades entirely. And why would we want to eliminate grades? The first idea is that traditional grading systems don't typically leave room for mistakes, right? We grade everything. All of that goes into the final grade assessment for the students. So even though we recognize in watching that video that mistakes were critical, right? As that skateboarding student was failing over and over again, they were paying attention to feedback on what their feet were doing and their body and their core and how that was all interacting. Traditional grading would grade every action, and so that student would have failed overall, potentially, right, in a traditional graded classroom. And we also know that points in grading don't motivate learning, they motivate performance, right? So students, when you say, what do you want to do in this course? I want to get an A, right? Because we've trained them to think about points and grades rather than the learning process. A second problem with traditional grading systems is that they are subjective and biased. And in part of that is because we're dealing with humans and we are all subjective and biased, right? We know that we are not perfect beings, although some of us try to be, right? We are fallible. We don't grade consistently. I know, I grade the first half of the stack very different than the bottom half of the stack. And I know that what I see early on can impact how I grade later on even. We carry implicit biases into our own grading, they're implicit, so we don't necessarily pay attention to them, and that can affect how we review and evaluate students' work. And we're using assessments that we've created. They are not valid or reliable in any sense of those terms. They have problems from time to time. I know I've given questions where I thought it was very clear what I was asking, and the students gave me something entirely different. We also tend to grade everything. We grade exams, we grade homework if it's turned in on time, and we penalize it if it's not turned in on time. We grade for effort, and we grade for class participation, and we grade and we grade and we grade. And so we're drowning in grading and putting points or letters onto everything. Much of what we actually end up grading reflects our students' environment. I was in Angie's session before, right? Their environment, meaning what is happening all outside of their classroom experiences, right? The work, the caring for parents or children, the farm requirements, getting back for a beet harvest or opening deer. That was a rude awakening when I first arrived here, was opening deer and how important that was for my students and how I then factored that into my syllabus. And this all brings us down to the question of like the evidence that we're collecting of students' knowledge, how valid is it really? Is it really something we want to be staking an A, a B, a D on? The last thing I wanted to talk about here was that traditional grading systems tend to be demotivating to students, right? How often do you have a student say, I just don't understand how my grade is calculated in this course? Maybe not now, maybe you've made adjustments, but that's a pretty common refrain we hear from students. And Joe Feldman calls this a result of omnibus grading, where we've got lots of different categories of things like class activities, quizzes, homework assignments, participation, all weighted differently, and it could be a cause for student confusion. Grades also, like we noted earlier, encourage that performance orientation versus a mastery or learning orientation, which we know research tells us that's very demotivating. So ungrading, how can that help us with this traditional grading problem? So ungrading is a movement towards eliminating grades entirely because of all the reasons that we've said before. Grades inhibit learning, they penalize risk-taking, and they promote shallow learning and superficial engagement with learning. So ungrading is actually, I think, an unfortunate term for a world of possibilities. But the goal here is to refocus our classrooms on learning, not on ranking, grades, grading, points, etc. And if I could boil ungrading down to kind of three big ideas, it's the idea of embracing flexibility, building trust, and centering and prioritizing descriptive feedback. So what do we mean by embracing flexibility? This means letting students have control. Let them lead the learning process. Invite students to set personal learning goals within the domain of your course. What is it that you want to do? What is it that you want to change? A great place to start, and I will add this to our resources list, is a paper I just read is about how we review participation. Let students set their goals for how they want to participate in the course, and then have them identify how they're going to evaluate themselves on it. So some students might say, my goal is to talk every day to my group members, while other students' goal may be to raise their hand and share their ideas to the bigger class as a whole, right? That allows the students ownership and control over their learning process. Part of the student-led learning process is also collaborating with students to arrive or to discuss progress and then arrive at a final grade, right? So you work together and jointly construct what it is that they have done in this class to earn whatever grade it is that they say they've earned, an A, a B, or a C, etc. Build in reflective assignments. Help the students complete self-evaluations and reflections so that they know how it is that they're doing, so that they can reflect on the activities they've done and how that tells them and provides them information about their learning. Use the reflections to help you engage in meaningful discussions with your students, whether it's verbal, talking to them in office hours, or written conversations, just leaving notes on their documents. Also reconsider strict deadlines. I will tell you right now, I don't have deadlines in my class. I have deadlines, but if a student misses them, it's fine. I always say, that's fine. Tell me when you can have it in and we'll go from there. How do we build trust? Lots of information here. And I encourage you to look at Angie's talk from last time as well. She had some resources as well. But one thing that Angie noted that I will also note is that share with your students. Tell them what your philosophy of learning is. Don't hide that behind any curtain. Share it early, first day of class. Share it before the first day of class if you can. Put it in your syllabus, right? Share it verbally with your students, and then come back to it. When you assign something, tell the students why you're doing that and how it aligns with your philosophy of learning. Share your learning goals and objectives with your students. Tell them what it is you think is important that they know and learn or be able to do. And also, if you can, try and share the why behind each assessment. Why are we doing this problem set? Why are we doing this extended response essay, thing, or whatever it might be? One thing that Jesse Stommel says is trust your students. And this is, I think, critical, right? Believe in your students, assume that they are trying their best, given whatever circumstances their life is throwing at them, and assume that they do not want to cheat. I can't emphasize that enough. I don't think our students are here to cheat on purpose. I think they find themselves in a very high stress environment where the stakes are ridiculous for some of them. They either get into their next program or not, or they get a job or not. And that stake is so high that it can really thwart their thinking about things. And finally, recognize your students as humans. Empathize, right? Know that they have diverse backgrounds, diverse experiences, diverse lives going on right now, and they have different pressures on their time and energy. The one thing we hate hearing as faculty, but which I have come to embrace, is that my course, shocking though this may be, is not the most important thing in their life. Probably not ever, right? And so I have to be okay with that the students are going to prioritize my course a little bit differently. The last thing in ungrading is centering descriptive feedback. This is perhaps the most actionable and tangible thing, but also the least actionable and tangible because it can be huge. This can blow up really big very quickly. We know that feedback is one of the most powerful instructional tools out there. Hands down, bar none, feedback improves learning. Of course, we saw that in the video, right? The skateboarder is getting feedback on his trick, and that's how he's going to be able to land the trick eventually. But we do know that some kinds of feedback work better than other. And Brookhart's 2008 piece found that descriptive feedback, which is feedback that's just words, just telling students, you know, here's what's missing, here's where you could add or extend, here's what's incorrect, here's what's good, right, is a good tool for promoting learning, whereas evaluative feedback, that's the feedback that puts a grade on it, is demotivating to learning. And in fact, you want to give students descriptive feedback in the absence of evaluative feedback. So feedback, no grades. Providing feedback, though, that's a challenge. That's something I really came up against a wall in my intro-bio class because it's, you know, this semester is only 90 students, but it's usually 135 students. So how do I give descriptive feedback to every single student? So one way is old-fashioned pen and paper, right? Feedback on individual assignments. Okay, I used Blackboard, so I was able to type. But that's still 135 students every week. That's more than I can handle. So I can maybe do group assignments. So they turn in only 45 assignments that I have to review. That's a little bit more manageable. We can use peer feedback. So the students talking to each other. We can use our learning assistants to also provide feedback. And we can teach students to use self-evaluation as well. So as I said, we had some ungrading resources. I put it in the chat. So it's a little bit above, but you can click on this here and you'll see a lot more resources about that link to people doing a lot of different things in a lot of different classrooms. I'm sharing here, calling out a few course syllabi that specifically show things that have been done here at NDSU. The first two reflect courses, my courses in biological sciences. The second two is an English course and a religious study course. It comes from Sean Burt, who's been doing ungrading a little bit longer than I have, and probably more authentic ungrading in terms of letting students, really having that conversation with students about their grades. If you look at these syllabus, you'll see my Bio 151 course is that mix of standards-based grading and ungrading. Bio 272 is ungrading, where the students set their learning goal. They didn't set their learning goals. That's still a mix of standards-based grading and ungrading sorts of things. I kind of blew through that. Jeff, did you want to add anything?
I mean, you nailed it, of course, as usual, Jenny. So the emphasis on feedback, though, I really want to stress as being really critical to this idea of ungrading. That really is a feature of a true ungrading approach, even though that is a terrible name, because we work in a system that does require a grade at the end of the semester. Though the intent here of an ungrading approach would be that we would think differently about how we arrive at that final grade. As an example, I use an ungrading approach, and this is an upper level, graduate level course. So I want you to keep that in perspective. But I use an approach that is all feedback, no grades, and it relies completely on this idea of descriptive feedback. As students turn in work to me, I only comment on what I think are the strengths of their particular assignment and where are there areas that they can improve. I don't put actually assign a grade or assign points to it like you see in bullet point 2 here from the Brookhart study, where it's really just focusing on what I'm commenting on their learning and the extent to which their learning has been achieved with respect to the outcomes that I've designed for the class. So this role of feedback is pretty critical. We tend to think of just putting points and grades as, oh, I've given them feedback. No, you really haven't. There's not much information that they can do with that, and so that's a really critical point of this whole ungrading approach.
There was a question, Jeff, if you could share your syllabus for the
Oh, sure.
class.
I can definitely add that in there. Sorry.
So you'll add it to the resources
Yep,
list?
I can add to the resources.
Thank you. So if you take a look at the ungrading resources and scrolling to the very bottom, there are syllabi here from NDSU courses that used ungrading. So you can take a look at that. So a question from Jenny is, are you giving feedback on product, process, and their soft skills? Jeff is busy putting his thing in there. So I will talk about like group processes. Yeah, so I think it depends a little bit on the course. So for my intro bio course, mostly the feedback is on their content understanding as evidenced on the problem set. So it is all descriptive. It will alert them that they're missing something, or they need to edit something because it's incorrect, or it looks good, they've met my expectations for that standard, and they're good to go on that. For my Bio 272 course, then we start to get into more skill. So we talk about how they're working in their groups, how they're communicating, how they're contributing, whether they feel like they are, what's the right word? Like contributing good enough. Basically, I'm struggling with the words, but whether they're contributing in a manner that's helping their group make progress towards the goal. And they were pretty honest, you know, in some of their reflections, they're like, I just didn't have time the last 2 weeks. So I was really, you know, going on the coattails of my group members. And conversely, their partners would be like, yeah, we know, you know, so-and-so wasn't able, you know, they had these extenuating circumstances, but they should be able to contribute more so in the following weeks, that sort of a thing.
So Jenny Linker's questions these are fantastic questions, and they're really, it's really important if you're going to, I mean, this I think is true for any grading approach, if you're using traditional or not, but being really clear about what the outcomes are for your course. This is so important. What do you want students to know and be able to do or value by the end of the course? And then what evidence would you want to collect that would demonstrate that students have achieved those particular outcomes? That becomes the really critical part. And so to Jenny's question about, are you giving feedback on product, process, and their soft skills, or, you know, their professional skills? Well, what do you care about? What are you trying to accomplish in your course? And that's what you should be giving feedback on. The feedback with respect to what you're trying to accomplish in the course. What's really important, though, to think about is when establishing your outcomes is what do students really need to know and be able to do, and what's nice for them to know and be able to do. I honestly think that faculty spend way too much time on the nice to know, and they only really spend a little bit of time on the need to know. And so we kind of create this situation for ourselves where we're grading all of these different things and providing feedback on all these kinds of different things. And really, we just need to be more strategic about what are we really trying to accomplish? What are those need to knows, need to do's, need to value, and really focus on that. There was something else, and then the reflection on the learning goals. Absolutely, I think that's a really critical part So yes, feedback from the instructor, right? The expert in the particular disciplinary area, but also the self-reflection piece is so critical. So in my grad level course, I met with each of the students at the end of the semester, and they made an argument. They made a case for the grade that they earned during the semester based on the outcomes that I had identified for the course. If you included more student-based outcomes or student-chosen, student-led outcomes, then they could be evaluating their achievement of those, maybe additional student determined outcomes.
So we have a question, Jeff. How is a descriptive feedback different from a descriptive rubric matrix?
Well, I would say my first response would be just the structure, actually. That's with a rubric, you're trying to anticipate different levels of criteria of student work. And so I think it's kind of similar, though I think descriptive feedback would be really focused on what the student actually produces. But I don't think they're that different other than really structured. Jenni, do you have a thought on that?
Well, I would say, so there's been a push to use rubrics more evaluatively with, here's a 4, here's a 3, here's a 2 sort of a thing. And I think there's been some pushback, rightly so, to turn it back into like, here are the key components of this answer, right? And to give key descriptions of what those components are. I use this with evolution, right? Because there's X number of key components I want to see in a student's response. And so I can give them that rubric so that they can start to see, oh, I need to talk about mutation and I need to talk about phenotypic variation and all these other things, right? And so in that way, it parallels descriptive feedback and the descriptive rubric are the same thing.
I have to comment on this. The Megan's question about, is it problematic if most students earn an A? And I say absolutely not, right? I mean, I think that's the goal, right? We want, what's the point of our courses? We want them to achieve these outcomes. We want them to accomplish understanding of knowledge and develop skills and dispositions, and so if the majority of the class earns an A, then that if we're collecting evidence of those outcomes, that students have achieved those outcomes, then that is a good thing. There is this notion that if students are earning a lot of A's, that it's not a rigorous class. That's total BS, and it's based on a lot of really false assumptions. So I want you all to hear from the director of assessment saying it is reasonable if you have clear outcomes, then you have evidence aligned, student evidence aligned with those outcomes. That's great that the majority of students are achieving the outcomes and eventually earning an A.
I agree. I just gave the most A's I've ever given in an intro bio class, and I had a Twitter thing, like, because it made me pause and go, oh no, I have done something terribly wrong. And then I was like, no, I can go back and I can document, I can show you exactly why each student earned that A. I can tell you what it is they know and are able to do based on the standards that we set for the class and how they achieve those. So I do see that Shar put a session evaluation in the notes for you to fill out, and we have 22 seconds before we get whisked back to the main room. So thanks everyone.